welcome everyone to this Saturday's Art Clinic Online. I am extremely excited to invite and host our neighbor across the hall, Blair Anderson, who has been at Glen Echo Park for 14 years. Can you believe it? And
Nope.
and she's been one of the few, I guess, resident artists to actually expand, starting from this silver studio across the hall into another studio called SilverWorks 2 Hot Metal, which is on the kind of the far side of the Yellow Barn. But both studios are just by themselves, they're actually works of art, and it's incredible use of space, and I'm just always in awe. I won't get into Blair's kind of backstory and stuff like that, but I just want to say, if you ever get a chance to see one of the exhibitions that Blair puts on at the park, it is life changing. I remember feeling very inadequate after an exhibition, and then of my own work, and then the next, maybe 2 months later, Blair put up a show in there, and I'm going, oh my gosh, this looks like a museum show, and the quality of the work, it's just something to behold. So
Yes.
I'm very always humbled to see Blair's work in the at Glen Echo Park, whether it's in the gallery across the hall or an exhibition. So I just want to say you guys are the best neighbors I could possibly ask for, and it is such an honor to have you speak for us today at the ACO. Thank you.
Amen.
Oh, wow. That's a little over the top there, Jordan.
Oh, no.
Thank you. Well, thanks for having me. It really is an honor. And so based on the fantastic works that I've seen other people do, I'm going to just sort of share a little bit about my story and show you those studios. So we've got a couple videos for you, and also some of my work, my process, and even mention a little bit about the business, because some of us who are artists also have to do the business side of this. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. So I'm going to go ahead and start. I think if I'm full screen, if we're going to share screens, then I'll get that started. Is that something that you need to do, Brian? Okay. All right. Let's get it started there. Okie doke. All right, here we go. All right, some of my work. So I love using rich texture and unusual stones and multiple techniques. So my journey started back in college. I was actually getting a degree in fine art, and yes, indeed, that was me back in the 80s with the 80s hair and the whole deal. But I stumbled across this thing called an elective called silver jewelry fabrication, and I got hopelessly hooked. So this is me. Now, are they seeing this, Brian? Okay. So this is me back in my 20s. Some of us as artists know the paying our dues stage of life. So my paying of dues was ramping up to the craft shows and then doing the juried shows, the major wholesale shows, Boston, Philadelphia, Circle Craft Vancouver. And then I started submitting to galleries. And at one point I had over 30 galleries representing my work. At that point, I had an obsession with putting a pin on the map every time I got a gallery. So those of us that know the drill on that, cold calling and all that, it's a challenge. 35 years later, this is me, and a little water under the bridge, but and no hair, but this is me in my studio. So a lot of water, like I said, under the bridge, multiple shows, multiple gallery locations. And now I've landed here in my home studio, and what I'm about to show you is our magical place called Glen Echo Park. So those of you that haven't been in the park, it's a pretty cool place. So I'm going to take you on a little tour. This is Glen Echo Park with all our artist community. That's Jordan's space, the coveted stone tower. We got the potters, the glass blowers, and we boast the last Denzel carousel that's 100 years old. It's pretty cool. And who doesn't love a carousel ride, right? I love it. It brings out your inner child. Okay, so my flying bubble is now going to take you for a quick peek into my studios. So here we go. So Studio 1, I opened in 2009. Got to meet Jordan and my wonderful neighbors there. They're right across from me. And here is Studio 1. Now, it's a really tiny space, and it was tricky to outfit because it's about the size of a shipping container. But it's amazing what you can do with an 8 feet wide space. But not just being my studio, but it's a teaching space. So you'll notice there are 8 stations, and those are for 8 students at a time. That's my maximum that I teach. I also kind of outfitted it a little bit like the park, so with some touches, antique touches, because we love our spaces. And it's a pretty basic space as far as tools, but there's enough of the good stuff for beginner students. So here I've laid a table for my beginners. And the mirrors are meant to make the space bigger, and I also am able to see my students' hands. Lots of the good tools. I also label everything so students recognize what they're looking at, for like the wire is gauged. Okay, that was Studio 1, and that's where I spend most of my time. But 5 years later, we opened up Studio 2. So let's give you a look at, this is the Cadillac of studios for me. So this one's on the main floor of the Yellow Barn. We sort of, Brian and I gave it a steampunk look. It was just a big white room when we took it over. So this one has more traditional jeweler's benches. Some tools in this space are more advanced. So again, my advanced students can luxuriate in this space. We call it hot metal because this is also where I have my casting equipment. Some really great tools. I have a world-class rolling mill. That's Millie right there. What?
Jordan helped with that.
Oh, that's right. Jordan helped move that for us. And we have our polishing station, so any metalsmiths out there can recognize that. Sandblaster in the back corner, and my kilns, that's for casting. We do enameling in the studio. And I also have a tiny little gallery at the front just to entice the public. So that's Studio 2, again, at our wonderful Glen Echo Park. So now I'm going to move on to just showing you a few other things. Now, I don't do all those shows anymore, the major gallery shows, and I don't mass produce. Instead, I do one solo show a year, as Jordan described. Typically, it's in the Popcorn Gallery. This year, I'm actually doing it in the Lower Stone Tower. But each collection takes on a theme, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute. But yeah, Brian and I recognize that doing jewelry, whenever you show it, the hard challenge is to show it on the level of what you would like to show another art form. So in my collections, I tend to kind of go all out for that. Now, I've always done themes. So from the very beginning of that picture you saw back in the 80s, I've employed themes in my work. So these are just a list of some of the themes over the years. Silver Speaks. I just basically take a look at what is speaking to me, and then the silver tells me what to do. The fifth element was dedicated to doing the 5 elements, water, fire, that type of thing. Captured in Time was more of a relic, taking relics and incorporating. Wearable pink. That one was interesting because I have a number of people that come through my door that have been cancer survivors. So I did a whole show that we interviewed cancer survivors, and then I designed the work based on their stories. So, and there was one woman who, of course, just shaved her head and employed the wigs, and I went ahead and bought a wig, and that's actually me, not kind of going incognito in that particular show opening. Nobody knew who I was. Very fun. History we wear, again, the relics. That's a little younger versions of us. This was more recent. Synesthetica. Okay, so this one was inspired by music. So I'm a synesthete. I have synesthesia, which is a thing where you get your wires crossed. I don't know if anybody knows what this is, but mine tends to be, if you play a bar of music, it's a trigger for me. So the trigger ends up give me a design. So it's kind of fun, but it's kind of a curse too. So we decided, Brian and I decided, let's test this. So that particular show, I listened to a variety of different types of music. And then when a certain bar hit and triggered the design, I sketched the design and then I executed that design. So that was that entire show. But the fun thing is what we did was we also, Brian built iPods out of IKEA picture frames. So you could hear the exact bar of music that I heard when I did that design. So it was a kind of a fun play, and it was anywhere from classics to Beatles to, I mean, well, I will say Brian was merciless when he would play me something just to see what would happen. So that was an interesting show, put it that way. But at this point, I'm lucky, I'm really fortunate to have patrons that come around every year. So they're collectors, they come back year after year, and they seem to connect with the stories that I tell. I have a personal collection of my work that I just keep on display, and you never know who walks through the door that gets reached by that particular story. And then I know the pieces are going home to a good home. So my children are going forth. So again, one of the shows. So a little bit about telling the story, and then I'll open up for some questions. But the way I approach this, it depends on the theme. And this one was like the captured in time theme. One of my favorite pieces, this one's called Fahrenheit 451. And if you're aware of the story, Fahrenheit 451, I'm just going to put up the book here. So here's the book, but I'll also put it over here so you can see it. So Fahrenheit 451 is a story, it's a sci-fi story about, if anybody knows, about a fireman. And in this futuristic story, the firemen actually burn books. So I thought that was a little bit, well, let's just say it's a little bit timely right now. But what you don't know about this pendant, even though it's a little burning building, is the great thing about it. The magic here is if you pull it apart, it's got a jump drive. And that little thumb drive, we packed it with 10,000 readable books. So this is the interface inside the pendant. And you can scroll that and end up reading a zillion different, well, 10,000 different titles. And I'm honored that this is actually in the Carol Trawick collection. So that one went to her. But yeah, Fahrenheit 451, one of my favorites. Now, another story, and I'll open for questions after this, is Haitian Shorts. Now, this tells the story of fair trade gems. So I was kind of obsessed with the idea that in order to know where your luxury item is coming from, it has to go down the trail of the mining aspect and, you know, the whole term blood diamond, the mining aspect through to the merchant, to the cutter, through to the jeweler, and then to the patron. So this one, Haitian Shorts, why is it called Haitian Shorts? We were on a family vacation this is in the Bahamas, and my son and I were walking a beach. What you don't see on the other side of the beach is a shipwreck. And the shipwreck was a Haitian refugee boat, sadly. But what was in the mass of wreckage was clothing, so clothing items. And there was a pair of shorts, the denim shorts, they happened to fit me. I'm thinking, oh, but then I started thinking, what journey has this taken from Haiti to the Bahamas to me, and where do we put it? So I developed this piece, and what you'll see is the panels on either side, those are denim, and they're denim captured in resin. And those all have moving parts, so the whole thing spins like an engine. And the idea is the machine that is our luxury items. So that's Haitian shorts. So sterling silver, amethyst, diamond, carnelian, peridot, lapis, and my Haitian shorts. Now the diamond was the one thing I had from before, so I to this day do not know if that diamond was questionable in the blood diamond. So there we go, Haitian shorts.
Wow.
A little bit about the business, So there are elements about taking your work out there, and many elements to this. One of them I do is, well, that's Brian behind the camera, is photographing my work on a model. So before a show opens, we photograph all of the work on the model about 2 weeks in advance, so we have it captured. We also photograph all of the work, as you saw in the beginning of my presentation. You see the photos. Brian does all that, so he's the man behind the camera. He's makes me look good. But other business aspects, oh, that's the piece you saw on the model. That's my 10-foot chain, so it is actually 10 feet long. Packaging, marketing, all that stuff. I have a graphic design background, so a lot of my work in my graphic design goes into my handouts and my marketing. So that little passport book is a marketing tool. So that's part of the business that, people ask me, are you just making jewelry all the time? Well, no, I wish I could say yes, but probably 20 to 30% of my time is spent actually doing the craft work myself. Process. This is a common question. Do you sketch or don't you sketch? Do you, so yes, the synesthesia collection, I did do sketching. This one, sometimes it's just what item speaks to me. This was a 2,000-year-old drachma. It's a coin. And I will sketch or I will assemble. I use Lost Wax casting, which is another means of actually creating, forming. There's all sorts of different techniques that we use as metalsmiths. So this one, that just happens to show the process of how this one came together. And I'm about to torch this. There's a piece that goes on the top of it. And so it's precariously placed in, it's called pumice, and it holds the work while you're actually smithing. Okay, I think I can open up to questions. I've got more in the presentation, but I think we can probably, if anybody is curious about anything, I'd love to answer any questions if there are.
Oh, there's so many questions. This is Jordan, of course, but I have a question that I think broad in the art spectrum in terms of, regardless of your medium, it's always kind of the hard thing, but when do you decide to kind of switch gears? You have all these kind of stories or specific stories based around a show, and like when you're not planning for the next show and you have this kind of time to yourself to construct or build or whatever, is there ever like a situation where you don't have an idea for a piece, or maybe the show that you just finished, the idea wasn't kind of fully run through and you still have that kind of nagging desire to continue with that? Or like what happens, how do ideas kind of work with you, and how do you kind of pursue them, or I don't know, not repress them, but move on? You know what I mean?
So that question sounds like it comes from some personal experience there of yeah, what do you do and how do you do it?
Maybe.
Yeah, I think every artist has that mode. Shifting gears is tricky, going from especially teaching mode to, okay, I'm teaching, I've got all these classes, and then I have to shift into actually creating a collection. And it feels like a very painful on-ramp to get into that mode. But once I'm running, like once that kicks in, I don't know, but I always have this moment of panic, like after all these years, is there going to be anything left? But then I tickle the muse a bit, and it starts to kick in, and then it ramps. It's like this supernatural high. It just ramps up, and in that mode, it's like everything is flowing, really flowing, and so the pieces are coming fast, almost to the point where they're coming too fast for me to catch up. That's like pre-show. That's pre-collection. The hard part is cutting that off when the collection is done, or it has to be done because of the time. The deadline happens. I'm just so juiced that it's really hard to let go of that and go, oh, I have to go back to, oh, here we go, down, 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 because there's such a joy of putting that together. Now, as far as the day-to-day having to make something or wanting to make something, it's a rhythm, and there's certain times a year that I cater to certain things. We just went through February. I call it Heart Hell Month because I'm not a heart person, but as a jeweler and you're making your living, guess what? We get to make all sorts of hearts. So I've got a collection of heart-related things in my little gallery right now. But yeah, there's definitely over the years I've developed a rhythm to, and I have boxes of unfinished projects too. So I don't know if you have unfinished paintings, but there are things that I started and were like really inspiring, and then I got interrupted, and then I had to put it aside, and then you come back to it, and you might not be as inspired at that point. But the real rhythm in my work is that coming out onto that solo show, because I commit to doing only new work for those shows, unless it's a retrospective, which I've done once. Only new work, and I do at least 35 pieces for that show, 10 really signature pieces, but then I commit myself to do at least 35. So but again, it's just like this rush of, when you're flowing as an artist, it's just the coolest sensation ever. So I hope that answers your question.
No, that's great. No, I kind of had a follow-up question to that. You mentioned, the unfinished projects. Is that difficult to abandon an idea, or how does that feel to you as an artist?
I have such a flow that I will shift from one piece to another just to keep it going. And I've forgiven myself for if I don't go back to a piece, or if it's telling me not to go back. And that's probably the key, is it's, when a piece lands, when a composition lands, and you're just sort of dwelling in that moment. And if you have one that's just not landing, I've learned that there are times that it's appropriate to abandon it, to just go, this isn't. In fact, I've actually taken work that were finished, and I did this in front of a class once just to mortify my students, because I get a kick out of that. But I took a piece and I said, okay, design-wise, what do you think? Does this particular thing work? And of course they're going, oh yeah, oh yeah. I'm like, no, not really. And I took some shears and chopped it apart, and they were like, ah. But I'm like, to commit to the design process, you need to be willing to recognize when something is not working, or it could be better.
This is Mariana, if I may follow up a little bit. There's a question on the chat about the DC rooftops jewelry, and how Nancy has a bunch of them, and I do too, by the way. And I also wanted to ask you something else. If after you answer that, thank you.
So specifically the DC rooftops, what are they? Okay, so I have a friend who actually had a roofing company downtown, and what he would do is bring me the copper when he replaced a roof. So you see the different colors. So the antiquated roofing material, the vintage stuff, comes to me, and then I shave off the patina. I create a shape and then shave off the patina to expose the copper underneath. So this copper is like decades old. So he brings me these panels, and then I make jewelry out of them. And I have to admit, it's kind of embarrassing because Brian calls it printing money, because they're a kind of just a Zen thing that you just kind of crank out. But I put them on the shelf, and people just kind of gravitate toward it because they're DC. It's one of those objects that you can give as a gift. And oh, by the way, it's recycled copper from DC. Anyway, they're
That's
fun.
great. Thank you. And I have a different question for you and Brian, if you will. I wanted to understand, you said you went to art school and then later said that you have a graphic design background as well. So, and I know that Brian does computer stuff like par excellence, but beyond that, he's a techie, right? Could you tell us a little more about each one's preparation and what you're combining? And we see the product and it's fantastic.
So the graphic design background, so I'm a painter. I do a number of things, not like a painter like Jordan. I have painted, but I thought in college I was going to become an illustrator, and so my approach tends to go in the graphic design direction, which is flat. It doesn't. My pieces are not always three-dimensional in the work. But it has informed the way I approach the work. I'm not sure if that's answering your question. And then Brian's tech, can you reiterate what you were asking about his world?
Yes, a little bit about his preparation and how it sort of converges with yours. I wanted to understand that.
Yeah, us as a team, really. Yeah, when we're doing a show, and I'll say we, because it's my jewelry, but he always has some other approach to identifying works. Like for instance, Romancing the Stone, we had a presentation that he developed that was all the stones visually you could see from around the world and what part of the world they came from. So there was an interactive quality to that. Obviously the iPods, that was him. Each show has had a component to it. You know, the Wearable Pink show, he did the interviewing of the women and then did the video editing, and we actually showed their interviews during the show. So that was a really kind of a poignant time because each story was different, and so we partnered in him doing the interview and me taking the interview and telling the woman's story there. Do you want to stick your head in the frame, Brian, and say hi?
Yes, yeah, that would be great.
He's the man behind the curtain that way, actually, but he's coming
Here.
Sounds
Hi.
great. Hi.
So I can't hear, but I think another good example, like the graphic design thing, you took a break from metalsmithing for a few years because you kind of got burned out on the mass production thing and started a Visual Planet. And there was a collaboration there too, where your graphic design came into play, but then the techie website stuff. Goodbye. I'll let you.
Yeah, we put a business together where we traveled and I took photos, and it was free stock. So we ended up developing a website that was, I think I had 15,000 images that I had created, both photoshopped and photographed. You know, spent 2 days in Chartres Cathedral shooting Chartres, and so that we paired up together for that. But yeah, I got a little burned out, and I'll just share a story that you saw in the beginning. Probably I had out. I'll put it back up again. So early on, when I was young and we were poor, you know, young poor artists, I discovered I needed some glasses. My eyesight was starting to go, and so couldn't afford them, right? So I made some. Now these ones I actually have won awards for. The ones that I made initially were a lot cruder than this. These are much more sophisticated, and they are actually eyewear that you can put lenses in and wear them. Both Brian and I had ones that we wore for years. His even had the sunglass clip that I made for them. But the reason I took an extended break from smithing was I had a gentleman who loved the collection, and I went ahead and developed. It took me a year to develop this collection, and then he was going to shop them across the Pacific Rim and actually get places to order them, and he stole them. So, as an artist, having that happen to you, it's a little traumatic, and I was completely washed with I can't work anymore. I can't do this anymore. So I did take an extended break from smithing. And those of you that are creatives know that usually when you go into a place that's got work that's similar to yours, or you can appreciate other artists, you go in and you get inspired by looking at other people's work. I was like, there was nothing. So it took me a few years to actually get the sense of that back. So these two are from before. Those two pieces are from the before times. I've since picked that up and tried to make them again. I've yet to execute, but the ones you saw me wearing also were my pink ones. So those are my sunglasses. But yeah, a lot of us as artists end up having some of those stories where it's like, it's tough out there. You know, you have to deal with some of those not so great experiences. But yeah, that's a shared story.
The doctor in me says that's a horrible violation.
It was, yeah, it was.
For sure, it must have been pretty devastating at the time.
Yeah, it was, and it was complicated because he was a friend, and so that made it even weirder. But you move on too. You move on, and then once I picked up the torch again, it was like, oh. The other thing is, as artists, you kind of go, can I ever do this again? Like, is it just removed? And I picked up the torch. 2 days in, I was back up and running. And that was, once I kind of got over the trauma, then I was like, okay, I can, yeah, I'm back. So
that's how healing your art is.
That's true. That's very true. It is a place of healing. In fact, the studios that I run, the students that come, you know, so many of them, as you know, are people that work on the Hill or have these crazy jobs, and they find therapy in banging on metal. Okay, let's face it, hammering metal is like, you guys hear it across the way, you hear the hammering. Yeah, that's therapeutic.
It is lovely too. We have some students who cross paths with you as well as us, and it's lovely to hear their story and how much they love working with you. One of the chat questions that came up that I saw is, is all your jewelry one of a kind, or do you either make copies or allow copies?
Great question. Back in the day when I call it mass producing, which I really wasn't. I was making everything separately myself, but they were copies. Like I would make a line. So I had a line so the wholesalers could go and say, I want 10 of these with these stones and blah, blah, blah. Which, you know, I don't recommend anybody do that. I mean, if you're truly just about the business, it's the way to make the living. I don't do that anymore. I have the luxury of doing one-of-a-kind pieces, other than my rooftops, which I try to make them all one-of-a-kind, but there's a point where they start, you know, they're similar, and, you know, but I just have fun with them. But the bigger work, I definitely do one-of-a-kind. You know, it hurts me to try to copy something. It's like it's not. In fact, the other thing I don't do is commissions. Doing something based on somebody else's idea. I no. Been there, done that, bought the t-shirt.
Point.
So
Good point. And the reason I was asking about the two of you also, and I'm curious, most husband-wife teams don't work out. I mean, in the sort of statistically, no, I don't mean in the marriage, but like having a business together or
yeah,
collaborating a lot. And so I'm amazed and I'm awed by your team.
I can't even get Nina to sip her portrait anymore. So
Yes, right. It's very difficult for two independent beings to sort of come together to produce something because their ego gets in the way. Right?
yeah, no, I get that. The two creatives especially.
Yeah.
You know, we've been a team since we were dating. You know, there was some crazy things we did artistically even before we got married that it landed there to start with, and then you know, as you develop together, I'm very blessed. You know, we have a great relationship, and the team aspect, I think we just knew early on that we needed to just support each other's work, and we've sort of traded places over the years, back and forth. There was a time that he was at the forefront and I was sort of the support background. SilverWorks has been kind of the reverse, where he's been the support and I've been in the foreground. But we do it all together. I mean, and we have fun with it. I mean, it's like, oh, what about this? And oh, what if we do this? Of course, some of the ideas that I end up with, he he does this. Here we are. We're going on the roller coaster again. Here's the Blair roller coaster. What? The Blair Venture, he calls them Blair Ventures. So, but yeah, we just, you know, we pick up the slack from each other if there is slack at times, but we just love the journey. It's a part of the process.
And how is
it? It shows in the work. Sorry, it shows in the work how much you have love together.
And how is it? I mean, this may be a little an out there question, almost unrelated, but like your son is an incredible author as well. Like, how does having two creative parents, how does that work? I mean, I fear that my children will be creative spirits in a lot of ways, but
well, you should know this, you know, because you are a creative and you imbue that in your children. Well, I would have been really disappointed if our son had grown up to be an accountant. But he, you know, okay, he went to normal school, but I also think in a way we homeschooled as well, because there was so much creativity happening in the home that he couldn't escape it. You know, we did claymation videos, like stopgap, you know, animation. Like we played. Well, somebody described us as the Andersons. They play hard. It's just that they play hard. You know, we just had a good time with all of it. So yeah, he is uber creative and he's a great author, but he's also taken up his painting again. So you know, he went to Micah, and so he's doing really, really well. But yeah, a super creative individual and smart.
Yeah, he is. And I have one last question for me, which is kind of like the idea of form and function, and how you balance I want to say like the wearability versus the idea and the concept. Does that ever get to kind of your idea get almost overpowering, and it's almost, I don't want to say unwearable just for weight reasons or pokiness reasons or things like that? But how do you balance that kind of form and functionality of it?
I don't. Actually, no, you're right. And I talk about that to my students, about how you actually can, how you can out-design something. Because there's the runway designs that, you know, are not wearable. They're not meant to be. They're more concept art. Lewis is a good example of the concept artist. I'll talk about him later if you want. But I don't restrict myself to that. And what I've found over the years is there may be a piece that I really wanted to make and I made it, and it'll sit on the shelf for years. And then that one individual walks in who has the right neckline, has the right everything going on. A good example of this is really quickly, in the collection of the relics, the history that we wear, I took different iconic relics, and one of them happened to be coal brought up from the Titanic. And so I did a neck piece, just all silver, and it was like a buoy on the ocean that went around the neck in one wire, and then it floated like this. And it was years sitting on one of those busts, and somebody walked in, this woman, statuesque, gray hair, beautiful, wearing black. And I have little frames that describe the stories. Usually it's not just a title, but it's actually, you know, the whole verbiage that goes along with what I'm trying to convey. And she gravitated to that piece, and I went, oh, you've got to try it on. So put it on her, and of course it looked lovely. I said, but as an artist, it's really important for me if you read the story that you understand. And she read this story and she started to cry. She had either known someone or been related to someone who had survived the Titanic. So it's that kind of thing where, all right, should I just try to make things wearable, or should I actually do that? There's that whole argument of art versus craft, and is mine craft or is it art? And I'd like to think it's art. I recognize that it's definitely craft, but I don't limit myself. And the 10-foot chain, that was just a lark. That was me going, how big of a chain can I make? And I don't know if you've seen the picture, Jordan, but I had a bride actually wear it down her train. And so I have a picture of the bride's back with the chain on her. So, you know, hey, it's just the cost of silver, right? So
I actually had a question about Lewis, because I was thinking as you were mentioning him that, you know, you as an artist here are also a mentor to a lot of young, really talented silversmiths. Can you talk about like how do you develop, how do you talk to future artists, future Blair Andersons of the world?
Wow. Yeah, in fact, I have a brief video that was the introduction to an interview with Lewis. So if you don't mind, I'll play that. Let's see. It's not this one.
We should clone Lewis while we're cloning Brian, by the way.
Right, exactly. Okay, so this goes right into what you just suggested, that you know, we had this notion of what is it to give back, and so we have a thing called Ex Nihilo. Brian and I developed. Ultimately, we are building this place in the Bahamas. We have the land and the buildings are designed, and it's going to be residency there. But we started the on-ramp here at SilverWorks with silversmiths. So I'm going to just show this. So this video is an artist talk. Blair Anderson. You may know me as the director of SilverWorks Studio and Gallery. What you may not know is that I'm also the co-founder of Ex Nihilo Inc. Ex Nihilo is all about creating opportunities and space for people to pursue their creative potential, primarily in the US and also in the Bahamas. So in 2013, Ex Nihilo began a residency program for junior artists, emerging artists, mid-career and senior artists at SilverWorks. The Ex Nihilo residents are awarded free classes, free studio time, an exhibition at the end of their residency, and in the case of our junior artists, we photograph their work for their college portfolio. Since 2013, we've hosted 10 artists at SilverWorks and 1 in the Bahamas. I am proud to say that the juniors that have gone through our program have gone on to colleges like RISD, Pratt, and Ringling. Those in the program benefit from studio access, but also get to tap into the vast knowledge of all of the SilverWorks staff, some of the work that you're seeing here. So the young man you saw at the end there, that's Louis Catala. He has gone on to, now he's studying in Milan. He has collectors. He came to me when he was 15, and he took a class. It was my 5-week class, and he had broken his leg, so he was bored, and so he decided to take this class. And in the 5th session, I took his mom aside. I said, I need to talk to you about this kid. I've never seen a talent like this in my life. And so that's when we just piled on the free studio and all that stuff. He's 22 now and just has surpassed my skill level like long ago. But yeah, that little picture of him, that was when he was his first solo show with me, which was, I don't know, he was this tall, and now I can't even reach it, how tall he is. And our newest junior, in fact, it's those numbers were incorrect because we've got more people through since that interview. But the newest junior his name is Sam, and he's 9 years old. So it's fun to watch these kids, and it's not the program isn't meant to make jewelers. It's meant to expose them to art, and so a number of those people that you saw have gone on with careers that, you know, I've got one of them is just high up in animation. She did the Baby Yoda doll. Like she's in that industry now, and so it's not about making jewelers, but Lewis is one of those people that are actually going on to with that craft, and he's amazing. So any other questions?
The accolades are piling up on the chat, by the way, how fabulous your art is, and that it's truly art. And people will make sure to come and visit as well.
Linda, did you have a question?
I have a question. Can you hear me? It's Lan. When is your next show, and how old is your son?
Our son just turned 35, and the next show, and actually this one is going to be, they were awarding me a show on the heels of my other show. Oh, Brian just brought up a photo. Okay, so that's our son.
Oh my, he's a big boy.
Yeah,
must have been at him.
So, and yeah, that's our son. But the next show is actually going to be in the Lower Stone Tower. The park was originally going to give me another show just almost on the heels of the last one in the Popcorn Gallery. First of all, I'm not sure people are going to want to see it that fast, the wraparound. And so I proposed doing a smaller collection in the Stone Tower. So they said yes. So that's happening in June. The opening is June, the first week in June. But I've done something kind of self-indulgent with that one. The theme is a little unique, and I'm not sure it's got a larger target audience, but I'm a bit of a sci-fi nerd. And so I'm collecting concepts from a bunch of different sci-fi shows. I mean, name your favorite if you're a sci-fi person. And I'm designing jewelry of the future. So
Ooh, are you gonna do 3-body problem?
What?
The 3-body problem.
Say that again.
There's a book that's by a Chinese sci-fi author called, it's a trilogy, 3-body problem.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So good. If you do, I'll buy that.
Yeah, yeah. So I will definitely be looking at that.
I'm excited.
Yes, the title is the Silversmith's Guide to the Galaxy.
Oh, I love it.
Wow.
There you go.
I love it.
Would you talk a
that'll be
little
fun.
bit more about the synesthesia and how that inspires you and works for you?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's, you know how some synesthesia, someone will taste a color, or it's when the senses crisscross and conflict, and actually one affects the other. So for me, it's probably partly because my husband is a musician, but for me, it's there's a stimulant trigger that happens. I will be listening to a piece of music, and it won't be the whole piece of music. It'll be a portion that a certain cadence happens, or a certain rhythm, something, and it'll trigger a design. Now there's 3 different ways it triggers it for me. One is the complete design. I see the entire thing and I have to get it down on paper really quick, and then I can execute it. That's easy. So the entire thing hits. Then there's the one where a portion hits and it's sort of tickling my senses. And then it's like me having to dig out the concept out of that. It's like, what's a way to, it's like unearthing a dinosaur. You know, you're finding where that is. And then the third one is just, it's a notion. It's a notion, it's a feeling. It's not anything visual, but it's something that you kind of tap into. So that's how it hits me.
And Blair, it manifests visually mostly. So in other words, the music, the auditory is what sort of is translating as a visual interpretation in your mind. Thank you.
Yeah, exactly.
Great.
Yeah. It can be fun. It can be torture. If I need inspiration, I can force the trigger. Like I can try to force it. And sometimes that gets me back on the on-ramp, and back to one of Jordan's questions is I have tools in my toolbox that I can, resort to get that back going.
And did art school help you to the design, like you're having to draw? In other words, before you execute something, you are drawing it, are you not? And are you drawing it as a flat appearance? Do you draw the side, the 3-dimensionality? What do you tend to draw?
That's a great question. Yeah, I mean, before I even went to college, I could execute really fine drawing. So when it came to time to actually draw jewelry, it was really, really simple for me to do that. So honestly, I wouldn't even give college the credit for getting me to that point. It was, I think the best thing I gained from college was my husband. So there's that. But honestly, the drawing, I do 3-dimensional drawing, mostly flat though, because I know in my head what, at this point in the stage of life and as a silversmith, I know what the 3-dimensional quality is going to be. So that's already part of the toolbox.
And do you save your drawings?
I do have a number of drawings from way back. Yeah, I have a book that I had from college that even has some of my ceramic work in it. And really fun fact, and I think is really interesting, is when our son was coming home from high school with ceramic pieces that he had done, they were just like mine, but he had never seen my work. And so it was just one of those things like, oh, interesting how the genetic flow of whatever that is. I mean, just his hand building was the same as my hand building. It was just kind of bizarre. So yeah, I have a book of some of those sketches. And
it would be so interesting to see it in an exhibit, or to see some pages or copies of some pages. I think that's artistic also. It would be great to see.
Yeah, there's the whole aspect of an archive. I love the time frame that we live in now, which our archive is photos. I mean, it's so easy to archive your work. Back in the day, we were taking slides and all that stuff to archive it, and not just sketches, but having to preserve what you made. And now it's like I have this great body of work that I can just put on a slideshow. And in fact, you guys see it every day across the way with my screen that's rotating all the work on the screen.
That's wonderful.
Well, thank you so much, Blair. It has just been an incredible experience. So I encourage everyone who may have a question later on to drop by SilverWorks and say hi and buy stuff. Just because it's really hard to walk into the studio without being, ooh, that could look good on me. So I encourage you all to go spend some money. And join us in 2 weeks. Mary Beth, actually, I don't know if she's still here or not, but she's presenting once again, another incredible DC artist for everyone. So join us again in 2 weeks and have a great Saturday.
Can you quickly tell us when you're open on both studios?
Oh, sure. Right now, our opening is Thursday through Sunday, 11 to 5, and both studios are open on those hours. And yeah, come say hi. And thanks for letting me talk
Thank
about my
you
work.
so much. This was fabulous. And the accolades continue on the chat. Thank you.
Oh,
We'll let you
awesome.
know. We'll update you.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank
Cool.
you and
Cool.
Brian too.